In this video, I want to talk to you about using the 4K 120 frames per second mode on the Sony FX30 and how to get clean images out of it, because believe it or not, it is absolutely possible. I've been getting a lot of questions about this because a lot of you have been shooting in S-Log3 using the native ISOs of 800, 2500, but getting really grainy images and wondering, is this a problem with the camera? Is this an issue on my part? Is it user error? And unfortunately, I'm going to let you know it is user error, and there is absolutely ways to get super clean images out of the 4K 120 frames per second mode. So I'm going to show you examples of shooting in the different ISOs at ISO 800, at ISO 200, and show you why shooting at a lower ISO will get you much cleaner images shooting on the FX30 at 120 frames per second. So as you see right here, this is a shot of a DeLorean at ISO 800, and traditionally speaking, you want to shoot at 800 because that's going to have the best dynamic range. However, in the 4K 120 frames per second mode, when shooting cropped in on this sensor, it is going to magnify the grain pattern. So you see it's very grainy. Now see what happens when I take the ISO down to 200 and you see the grain is gone. It's actually a pretty clean image. So this issue happens on any camera when you're using either a crop mode or the image crops in to do slow motion. I actually had to learn this shooting on the Red Komodo because to get decent slow motion on that camera, you have to shoot at the lower resolutions, meaning that you crop in heavily on the sensor. And when I was shooting 2K 120 on the Red Komodo, like it was so noisy, so crazy. But once I learned this, I actually got really great images shooting in that mode. So the first thing is you should not be using Cine EI mode when shooting in 4K 120 frames per second if you want clean images, because Cine EI will force you to either shoot at ISO 800 or ISO 2500 when using S-Log3. So you want to choose flexible ISO. Now, ideally, you want to shoot at ISO 200. That's where you're going to get the cleanest images in the 4K 120 frames per second mode. But there isn't magic here. There are drawbacks to doing so. When you're shooting at ISO 800 or 2500 on the FX30, you are getting the best overall dynamic range that that camera offers. So when you're shooting at a lower ISO, it's not that you're getting a terrible image, but you are sacrificing some of the dynamic range. So in the end, you have to choose what matters more to you. Do you want cleaner images or do you want better dynamic range? Now, you can clean up the images a little bit with noise reduction at the ISO 800 footage, but it is really noisy at 4K 120 frames per second, a lot noisier than shooting 800 ISO on the full sensor modes. So I would recommend, if you don't want to shoot all the way at 200, you don't want to sacrifice that much dynamic range, you find a sweet spot where you're okay with the balance of the grain and dynamic range loss shooting at a lower ISO than 800. Now, when you look at these images, the loss in dynamic range isn't super apparent, but in high dynamic range scenes, especially when you're shooting in S-Log3, you will notice a little bit of a difference in the highlights and the shadows shooting at this lower ISO. But again, if you want cleaner images, this is the best way to do it, especially in camera. I mean, look, it is a super clean image right here, and then a super grainy image right here. So the difference is night and day. If you have any questions about shooting at the 4K 120 frames per second mode, or anything you want me to cover about the Sony FX30, make sure to ask in the comments below. And if you got knowledge and value out of today's video, please make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell to keep up to date with the latest videos from the channel. Till next time, my name's Geoff Fagien. Thank you for watching as always, everybody, and I will see you in the next video.